Welcome to House of History. Last week we have seen Prussia shock the European theatre under Frederick the Great. As he passed away childless, his nephew Frederick Wilhelm II succeeded him. This new king was quite different from his uncle. He chased women, was good-natured, impulsive, and a lover of the arts and high culture. It earned him the nickname Fat Wilhelm, and historians have been rather harsh on him. Now, during his reign, Prussia expanded to unprecedented heights, increasing over a third in size. But the politics of this king also signaled the beginning of a period of decline for the Prussian Kingdom. All in all, it can be said this king stood in the Hohenzollern tradition of being the complete contrast of his predecessor. Welcome to the complete history of Prussia. Before we get to the new king's foreign policy, it is worth having a look at his domestic politics. As I mentioned, this new king was the opposite of his predecessor, certainly not a free thinker, but a religious, art-loving, impulsive and enterprising king. He could be somewhat compared to Prussia's first king, Frederick I, who was a lover and patron of the arts as well. He married several times. His first marriage to Elizabeth of Brunswick-Wolfenbüttel was disbanded after he cheated on her. And in turn Elizabeth decided to cheat on him with officers and court musicians. His second marriage led to 7 children. He had another 7 children with his mistress, all the while marrying 2 other women in secret. The king was very interested in mysticism and astrology, joining an esoteric offshoot of the Freemasons. During his reign, much was done for Prussia's architecture. The famous architect Karl Gotthard Langhans's buildings in Silesia, Berlin and Potsdam belonged to early neoclassical architecture. The king commissioned him to build the Brandenburg Gate with Johann Gottfried Schadows' chariot on top of it. During the king's reign, August Wilhelm Iveland put the Berlin Royal Theatre on the European map, and Karl Friedrich Zelter did just this as leader of the Singakademie. Although a fruitless attempt, the king even attempted to get Mozart to move to Berlin. Under his reign, Berlin turned into a city of literary political salons of German romantics. Obviously, all these fantastic cultural endeavors came at a cost, which is why historians generally aren't favorable when judging this king's reign. Under his rule, the Prussian gold coffers he inherited were depleted at an incredible pace. Court expenditure reached 2 million thalers per year, which was around 15% of the state budget, a tenfold increase from the expenses of Frederick the Great. As a matter of fact, Frederick the Great left Prussia with a massive treasury of 51 million thalers, something the new king managed to blow within 11 years. Now, although he was only king for 11 years, during these years he managed to secure more territory for Prussia than any other king before him. But he himself didn't really have an aptitude for international politics and warfare, leaving these affairs in the hands of trusted advisors and family members. Whereas the soldier king centralized Prussia's governmental system, and Frederick the Great more or less perfected this, under this king, it seemed that politics returned to the old dynastic style, with multiple factions at court trying to influence the king. One such example was Johann Christoph von Wöllner, a man that greatly influenced Prussia's domestic politics. Under him, the Edict of Religion was issued, a law that basically reversed the religious toleration that emerged under the monarchs before him. He greatly influenced several philosophers and freethinkers in Prussia, among whom Immanuel Kant, that was reprimanded after publishing an essay collection. Another important aspect of his reign was his preference for German. His predecessor preferred the cultured French language at court, but now German became the standard language. Another development was the famed grain policy, established under the soldier king. Using tariffs to control grain prices and protect domestic farmers under this new king, grain trade was radically deregulated. Free trade was encouraged and taxes were lowered. Not everything was deregulated, though. As a matter of fact, in 1794, the most extensive law code ever published to that day was published. It had nearly 20,000 articles attempting to cover every possible scenario where a law may be applicable. This project was started under Frederick the Great, however, and it wasn't a direct result of the new king. When it came to Prussia's foreign policy, it somewhat resembled the early years of Frederick the Great's reign in terms of recklessness. And during his early years, he was notorious for prestige politics instead of rationally weighing the costs and benefits of certain actions. One such example was the intervention in the Netherlands, which was embroiled in a civil war between the Patriots and Royalists. After the king's sister, Wilhelmina of Prussia, and her husband, Statthalter Willem V, were arrested by patriots, King Frederick Wilhelm II responded by invading the country with a large army of between 20 and 30,000 soldiers. It led to the direct fall of the patriots and the restoration of House of Orange, but admittedly, Prussia barely gained anything from it. The single most important event during this king's reign was the French Revolution of 1789. Not so much the revolution itself, but the developments it set in motion. Initially, Prussia looked very favorable at the French revolutionaries. After all, they could and would be crucial in breaking the Franco-Austrian alliance, and it seemed the new regime was completely in line with Prussia's liberal principles, such as the relative freedom of religion and the inheritance of their philosopher King Frederick the Great. In secret, the king now pursued a policy of peace with the revolutionaries. At the same time, the Habsburg monarchy was fearful of the developments in France. The Holy Roman Emperor Leopold II realized the danger of Prussia-backed revolution in Hungary and opened the door for Prussia for negotiations. Eventually, at the Treaty of Reichenbach, they buried the hatchet, and with it, nearly 60 years since the invasion of Silesia in 1740, Prusso-Austrian hostilities ended. With incredible ease, Frederick Wilhelm now broke off his attempts for peace with France and pursued a policy of war against the revolution. It directly led to the famous Declaration of Pillnitz in August 1791. The monarchs of Prussia and Austria jointly declared that their brother, the King Louis XVI, should be put in a position to create a government again. There now was a counter-revolutionary alliance on the European continent. In response, in France, the cries for war grew louder, until eventually, on the 20th of April 1792, the French government declared war on the Austrian Emperor. This could not be ignored, and it didn't. The Habsburg monarchy and the Prussian Kingdom now declared a joint statement, what became known as the Brunswick Manifesto, only antagonizing revolutionary France even more. In the summer of 1792, the Prussian and Austrian forces, accompanied by a French army of émigrés under the command of Louis XVI's brother, the Count of Artois, they marched into France. Straight from the beginning, the operation turned out to be more or less a failure. The French émigrés were deeply unpopular with the French population, and the Prussians and Austrians could not properly communicate. In September, at the Battle of Valmy, the Austro-Prussian forces were mercilessly mowed down by cannon fire, without being able to advance one bit. The first battle of the French revolutionaries was a success, but a blemish to Prussia and the Habsburg monarchy. Something else happened in the European theater that caused the Prussians to completely shift their attention away from France after that battle. Obviously, they still contributed soldiers to the battle's fall against the revolutionary French, and they did score several victories against French revolutionary forces, but they ended up only contributing a fraction of the Habsburg forces. The reason for this was pretty simple. To the east of Prussia, the opportunity presented itself to annex large parts of the already very weakened Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. As we have seen in the last video, the first partition of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was caused by internal turmoil between two factions, King Stanislav August versus the opposition. It led to Austria, Russia, and Prussia claiming parts of the country without much resistance. In 1772, these problems continued during the 1780s, and by the end of this decade, the Russians were fighting a very costly war against the Ottoman Empire, during the same time as the Austrians, mind you. Because of this, King Stanislav and several reformers decided to drastically change the political system that had given them so much trouble. After all, the Russians were in no position to intervene and stop these developments. On the 3rd of May 1791, a new constitution outlined the hereditary monarchy and something that resembled a central government. In short, the Commonwealth's rulers finally thought they were free from the scourges on their border, namely Austria, Russia, and Prussia. An independent Poland was against Russian interests, and King Frederick Wilhelm II was afraid that if the Poles got too strong, they would simply reclaim West Prussia. In May next year, Tsarina Catherine the Great sent a 100,000-strong army to invade Poland. During this Polish-Russian war, King Frederick Wilhelm sort of baited the Polish in thinking he'd support them. Expecting Prussian help, they avoided any serious engagement during the early stages. These reinforcements never arrived, however, and Poland was defeated not soon after. The Treaty of St. Petersburg was signed in January 1793, and Prussia received the rich port cities of Danzig and Thorn, and a sizable chunk of territory that created a larger connection between Silesia and East Prussia. The Russians took a chunk of territory about 4 times as large as Prussia's, but considering Prussia only backstabbed the Commonwealth and didn't properly fight for it, they already got more than they expected in the first place. Obviously, the claiming of territories from Poland caused resentment among its nobility. In March 1794, a man that is still considered a hero in Poland today, Tadeusz, launched his revolt against the partition powers. Although his revolt was directed mainly at the Russians, the Prussians were the first to attempt to crush it, which they did in order to increase their potential claim on more territory. Due to a lack of troops in the region, the Prussians initially were put on the back foot, until a Russian army marched into Poland to crush the revolt. The Austrian Empire now too sent a large army to not be left out of the spoils. To his credit, Tadeusz resisted all 3 great powers for 8 months until October 1794. The Russians emerged victorious at Maciejowice. A year later, in 1795, an agreement was reached between the powers, with Prussia gaining a large chunk of territory to the east of their duchy, with around 1 million inhabitants. This final partition meant the end of an independent Poland, and it would not be independent for another 123 years. Prussia's size increased about 1/3 of its original size, and it gained over 3 million inhabitants. Somehow, this new king that didn't really interest himself in military matters had managed to expand Prussia's territory with about 1/3, more than any monarch had done before him. Now, the king was more than satisfied with Prussia's status in the east. In the background, the French Revolutionary Wars were still waging on though. As such, the king decided he would not waste any more energy on it. He did an about-face, and signed a separate peace with France behind the back of his allies. The Peace of Basel would last for 11 years. Once again, a Prussian king betrayed his allies, and the Habsburg monarchy wasted no time to denounce this action. Then again, if we look at the terms of the peace signed, it was very advantageous to Prussia. To begin with, a clause agreed that the North German territories would remain neutral. As such, Prussia was in a great position to exert its influence all the way to the Rhine and Main. Because French aggression would be directed towards Austria, it also ensured the king could consolidate his eastern territories with any force necessary. But in reality, this move signaled the beginning of decline of Prussia. This was a high-risk, high-reward gamble that could turn out very advantageous, similar to the gambles of Frederick the Great 60 years before during the Silesian Wars. But it wasn't like that. By this point, the king had betrayed every European power he allied himself with within 6 years. Besides that, due to the disappearance of Poland, a crucial buffer between Prussia and Russia disappeared. Now, a largely indefensible border was shared with Russia. Furthermore, the neutrality zone agreed upon with revolutionary France basically cut in half the remnants of the Holy Roman Empire, leaving the bottom half open to Austrian influence. Oh, and perhaps even more important, over in France, a young and ambitious general, Napoleon Bonaparte, was quickly rising in popularity. When in 1797 Frederick Wilhelm II passed away, the Prussia he left behind was larger than it had ever been. He was succeeded by his son Frederick Wilhelm III, a cautious individual. This king sincerely opposed war and adhered to a policy of staunch neutrality. Unfortunately for him, this neutrality would usher in one of Prussia's darkest moments. How Prussia fared under this new king and during the Napoleonic Wars, we will see next episode. If that sounds interesting, consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you very much for watching this video. Make sure you check out the playlist with the entire history of Prussia on screen right now. I would also like to thank all my patrons for their generous support. If you enjoy House of History and want to support my work, consider subscribing to my channel. For just $1 a month, you will already gain access to the exclusive Patreon series. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.